it was a horror movie. There was a lot of violence, and I remember they had human limbs. They're obviously like fake, obviously.
Hey everybody, I'm joined today by the wonderful Ivana Baquero, who's here in Cannes celebrating the 20th anniversary of Pan's Labyrinth. Last night, a gorgeous celebration of this iconic movie with Guillermo del Toro in presence. And today we get to talk to Ivana about this incredible start, I guess, of her journey around this movie. Ivana, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey Alex, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I am such a fan of this film.
Oh, thank you.
I watched it 4 times. I showed it to my kids.
Yeah.
It is whimsical but dark. It's a horror movie but a fantasy movie at the same time. You play the central role of this story that takes many turns from fantasy to something darker. Go back to your 11-year-old self. How did you envisage such a movie?
You know what? It was a very interesting process. I remember every single thing, and I think a lot of people think that because I was a kid, I wasn't really aware of what was going on, or I wasn't, I guess, aware of the implications of what I was doing. But I was very self-aware. I'd already done, I think, 5 or 6 movies before Pan's Labyrinth. And then the great thing about Guillermo as a director is that he treated me like an adult in the best possible way. So the way he approached it with me is he gave me the same kind of workload he'd give to all the other castmates. He prepped me. He gave me a bunch of stuff to watch, to read about the Civil War in Spain, because he really wanted me to understand the depth of the suffering of the Civil War in Spain and of Ophelia. So, yeah, I mean, it was a very intense process. I definitely remember all of that kind of, the darkness, but also the light that came with it.
I remember distinctly your performance as being extremely mature for an 11-year-old. So what you're describing makes a lot of sense. But how did you prepare yourself still to, you had made 5 or 6 movies, as you said, but this was, I'm sure, a very different challenge.
It was, and I think it was because we all knew that we were doing something special, and I was a big fan. I didn't know Guillermo before the auditioning process, mind you, but as I watched his work to prepare, which I did, by the way, even though it's very dark, as an 11-year-old, I was very excited to work with him, and the preparation was, I think, what I kind of still do nowadays. I think what I did then informed a lot of the kind of actor that I then became later on. There was a lot of prep work about Ophelia, about where she came from, her relationships to the different characters in the movie. Again, watching a lot of visuals to inspire me to really understand Guillermo's very specific vision of the movie, because he was very, very specific about what he wanted to convey. And there was a lot of rehearsals because we had to nail it on set, because we had, all these creatures, Doug Jones playing the Pillman and the Fawn. And so, when we were on set, it was crunch time, so there was a lot of prep. And that really, I think that actually was like a masterclass in acting for me. It just built up so much of the way that I then knew to behave on set later on as I grew older and as I evolved as an actress. It was very informative.
Do you remember perhaps a guidance or an advice, a piece of advice or instruction that Guillermo gave you after he gave you the role, something kind of immediately to set you on your way to getting ready for this role?
So it wasn't specific to the role, but he said something that I took with me, and it gave me confidence as an actress as I progressed in my career. We all know it's treacherous. We all know it's not the easiest of professions, and there's a lot of times where there's rejection and you kind of stop believing in yourself sometimes. And I remember he said that the most important thing an actor has to have, of course you need to prepare yourself, of course you need to study, but you need instinct. And he said, you have the instinct. And I think it's so important as a creative in general, as an actor, but just as someone who puts, their heart out there to really follow their gut in this profession. So that advice really, I think it really stuck with me a lot, and it made me believe in myself to just follow my instinct, which is the most important thing, I think, as artists that we can have and believe in.
Such a complex story, such a challenge, just an immersive discussion that the movie has with the audience. Do you feel that this discussion, the first time you read the script, kind of made you, as you said, it set you on your path as an actress, but also did it make you kind of grow up a little quicker?
I think just the world of acting and being a child actor makes you grow up quicker, because you definitely have to live experiences that you wouldn't otherwise, and you're surrounded by adults and you're in a world of adults and you're expected to perform and to to nail it, just like any you get some slack, but I think I myself am very I'm a perfectionist, so there was a level of pressure that came with that. So of course, there was, there was a lot as a child actor that you have to sort of carry in that regard. But yeah, to answer your question, there was definitely a bit of pressure there. I don't know if did I answer your question?
Totally did.
Okay.
Totally did. The subject of the war is something that is very hard to fathom, at such a young age.
As a kid.
And here, in the context of this fantasy and the ramification of each part of the tasks that you have to do, and the family relationship, the idea of the notion of sacrifice, these are a lot of very advanced concepts.
Yeah.
And what kind of process did Guillermo put in place for you, or perhaps ongoingly through the shoot did you have with him, to make sure you met his expectations, but also really understood his vision?
There's a lot of nuance there, because I understood, of course, a lot of it. And again, there was a lot of prep involved. I think the movie's so complex as it is, and it talks about all these themes that I perhaps wasn't aware of as a kid. And I think the more I watch the movie now as an adult, the more I realize, about the war and the depth of it, really, and how sometimes the monsters are really the ones wearing their eyes in their hands. Sometimes they're just wearing uniforms. So I think a lot of that that level of complexity I interestingly discovered as I watched the movie, growing up. But yes, back then, again, in order to sort of meet those expectations and be able to perform and deliver, there was a lot of prep involved. And I remember he gave me a lot of material, like he made me watch The Grave of the Fireflies, which was about the war in Japan, and that's a very dark movie. I read a bunch of comics. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was another one of the comics he made me read. So, he made sure that I knew about the world that I was about to dive into. But again, I think beyond that, in terms of just all the complexities of the story and all the brutality and the cruelty, I think those are things that I've discovered myself watching the movie.
You projected yourself in a fantasy world, and this is what the first time I watched this movie, my mind was blown because of creatures, but because of the practical effects as well. I was always been a big fan of practical effects, but the level of craft in the design of each creatures and everything, it must have been almost feel like a game.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because I'm a massive fan of practical effects, and I think this movie has aged really well in that regard, because now I do watch a lot of movies and there's CGI, and to me, a lot of the times it loses the magic, and it kind of takes me out of it. And the fact that Pan's Labyrinth was mostly practical, except for a few CGI elements like the fairies. I remember they used to be tennis balls that I had to kind of follow with my eyes, but the rest was practical. So it was great that we had that, and that I was able to interact with real things instead of just green screen. So as a kid, that was actually really, really helpful to have that.
I was a bit of a turbulent child, and I know that if you had brought me on this set, I would have gone to goof around with Doug Jones and in any of the creatures or any of the anybody, or just how was it for you? Did you have fun? I'm sure you had fun, but I would say how was your interaction with all the creatures, everybody in their suits and everything? Were you able to also play a little bit?
Yeah, I was a very curious kid, and I just wanted to learn. I wanted to see. I wanted to get to discover the behind the scenes. I remember, like off topic, but a movie I had done previous to that where it was a horror movie. There was a lot of violence, and I remember they had human limbs. They're obviously like fake, obviously.
Every makeup artist tells you they're fake, but
they look so real. And they didn't want to show me because they thought it was going to be too gory for me. But I was like, no, show me them. So I remember I sneaked into the room of the makeup team, and I had to look at them on my own, and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. I remember the smell of the latex. I remember the smell of the fake blood, that sweet smell. So I was a very curious kid. So in Pan's Labyrinth, when I was able to interact with Doug dressed up, and the toad, which also was a practical effect, it was a lot of fun. I remember it was a lot of fun. But also, to be fair, once we were actually on set shooting, there wasn't a lot of time for laughter. That's when we really had to nail it, and we had limited time because of all the prosthetics and all the difficulty, and all the technical difficulty. Even Doug. I mean, Doug didn't know any Spanish when he shot the movie, so it was all he learned it phonetically, and he had these massive paragraphs, and he had no idea what he was saying. He was just saying words, so we couldn't do it too many times. We had to get it right. So it was always crunch time on set, but around that, there was always a lot of laughter, and Doug in particular, he's the sweetest man. So it was a treat to work with him.
This whole movie was a lift. I mean, it was incredible at the time to manage to make a movie like this. It felt like a giant production, but it was still done with, obviously Guillermo was at the stage of his career. He had Kronos before that, but it was not at the stage where, like perhaps today, where everybody would just say yes. So I know I read a lot about the intensity of the shoot.
Yeah.
And how was it for you to kind of take that pressure and kind of take it in your stride?
Yeah, power through it. It was very intense, but I don't know, I just had this little warrior in me that could just plow through anything. I remember I also had to go to school, and I was, specifically during that shoot, I was homeschooled, and so I had a studio teacher, but I would never actually left school, so I still have to be up to date with all my classmates. So it was, I'd work a particular amount of hours. In Spain back then, they didn't have that many regulations, so it would be quite a long day. And then I'd have to study. Then I'd have the studio teacher. I'd have to do all my lessons. So, it was intense, but at the same time, I remember it with such joy and lightness. When I think back on it, even though, as we spoke before, there was pressure and you had to deliver, and I was just a kid. I was an 11-year-old. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I speak about this a lot, but I had my parents always supporting me and protecting me a lot. So, with that in mind, it was kind of, it was a very character building experience, and I wouldn't change it, and it kind of made me who I am today, and I just really wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, I guess I managed.
Those characters they stayed with me every time I watched this film. I end up probably having at least one or two dreams involving one of those characters because they're so infectious.
How many times have you watched it, if I could ask?
4 times.
Oh wow, that's quite a lot.
This movie, what I adored with it was every time I discovered something new.
Yeah. I
felt that there was one time I would watch it more for the history side, for the way it was dealing with war. Sometimes it was actually more about the font. Sometimes it was about the tasks. It really kind of talked to me. So I was wondering, while shooting it, or after shooting it, or even the first time you watched it, did you have dreams of having had your almost real life experience with those creatures? Did it carry afterwards in dreams or in thoughts or imagination?
It comes back a lot to me. I think about it more when I'm not dreaming. Like, I think about the movie a lot, and you said something that's very interesting, which really resonates with me. Every time I watch it, I discover something else. But what I also feel is that it affects me depending on what I'm, living in the moment. So when I watched it last night, and with everything that's going on now, I was really fixated on Captain Vidal and how cruel he is and how much of a villain he is. And it affected me a lot because it made me suffer for the cruelty that sometimes humanity has, and how difficult it is to sort of fight against that. And Ophelia's just imagination and hope and curiosity being that counterpart. So that part of the story really affected me. But like you said, every time I watch it, I kind of look at a different part of it. You can kind of stick more to the fantasy side and to the beautiful side, or you can dive more into the brutality of the war. So I think about it, I think more when I daydream as opposed to when I'm dreaming. But I think as a kid, I might have had a nightmare or two, I'm not going to lie, about maybe the Pale Man or something like that. But yeah, it's a constant theme in my life, Pan's Labyrinth. It never leaves me. It never leaves my mind.
Which character, apart from yourself, is the most like you, your real you, from the story, but apart from your own character, which character did you relate to the more in the fictional or the real world of the film? Which one did you feel the closest to?
100% the Toad. It's a really good question. Actually, no one's asked me that question before, and I've done a lot of interviews about Pan's Labyrinth. What character am I most like? It's hard to answer with truth and honesty because you just don't know the kind of person that you would really be in a very. It's a very hard situation that all those characters are in, and they're all trying to survive. And you want to believe that you're going to be brave and you're going to fight against villainy, but you also have to sometimes compromise in order to survive, and I think the movie also touches a little bit on that. So I feel maybe Mercedes, Maribel Verdú's character, because she's kind of a middle ground. She's definitely a fighter and she's on the right side of history, but she also struggles with the idea that she sometimes has to do certain things in order to survive, things that she maybe doesn't want to be doing but needs to do in order to keep, her brother safe, her family safe, the people that she knows safe. And that's a very interesting character, and that's a very interesting complexity because, she could give it all up. She could leave, and she's still there fighting in her own way. So maybe that character would be the most similar to myself. Yeah.
If you met somebody who, unlike me, has never watched it, and you had one thing to tell them to motivate them to dive into this incredible world, what would be the key element that you think could convince just anyone?
Oh, so I know it's not a straight answer, but what's magical about the movie is that I guess depending on how you pitch it and how you view it, you can find a lure in it, and you can find different kinds of audiences that might be interested. It's a fantasy movie, so that's got beauty to it. You mentioned, I don't necessarily see it as perhaps a horror, but it has horror elements for sure. So there's that kind of pitch, but also, at the end of the day, I think it's a very universal movie. I don't think it's necessarily about the civil war in Spain. I think it's about, a lot of struggles that we are seeing nowadays, even more than ever. It's very relevant. I think it's important for people to watch and for people to, reignite their curiosity and just talk about it and have their own thoughts. So I think there's a little bit for everyone. That's what I would say, and that's why I would encourage people to watch the movie.
And obviously, this movie was a huge success. You got to be part of this incredible rollout of this movie,
yeah.
The world discovering your character, celebrating you, discovering you. Although you had done obviously movies before, but it led you to work with Kevin Costner and like how was it after? How was it after Pan's Labyrinth? How, like, in your mind, were you like buckled in and, you know, Kansas is going bye-bye, you know?
No, not at all. I was never like that. I just had my little simple life, and that's how I've always liked it. Obviously, it launched my career. I mean, I was scouted by American agents at this festival 20 years ago. So, you know, I was given a lot of opportunities, but my parents' priority was for me to keep going to school, to stay grounded. I was very happy with that. All I wanted to do was, you know, work and act, which was my passion, but I had no interest in, you know, the shiny part of the industry. So I went back to school. I remember, like, when I won the Goya in Spain, an award for acting, which was a very big deal there. I went back to school the next day as if nothing had happened. So yeah, life after Pans was, you know, very, very chill. I just kept doing my thing. Nothing really changed for me. I had a lovely childhood, and I just kept working and working and working, but then I would always come back home and I would always go back to school. So it was really balanced in that way. And so I think that's also kind of helped me be the person I am today, and I appreciate that sort of desire for my parents to really make sure I had a normal life within the chaos of the industry.
I think that's a very sage advice, to kind of return to as much normality as possible immediately, to balance it out, so that after that you're on healthy ground to then still pursue that career. And you've had obviously a great career since. You've worked consistently over the last 20 years. So right now you just completed Spartacus.
Spartacus, yeah, House of Ashur. Yeah, we just released that on Stars. We're very excited about that. And then, yeah, I'm able to work in Spain too, which honestly I love. And it's a treat to always be able to come back home. So I did a movie called Widow's Game recently too, which is on Netflix. But yeah, I mean, I'm grateful to everyone who's ever given me an opportunity. I know it's a tough industry, but when you are able to really connect with people, it's very meaningful. It's very rewarding. So it's worth it for sure.
So the Séance is very much about horror and fantasy and sci-fi, but obviously as a horror filmmaker, I have a little bias there. But I know that obviously you have worked a lot in horror.
Oh, yeah.
So
most of my career.
So how would you describe your relationship with horror?
It's so funny. I always say, I don't know if horror chose me or I chose it, because it's always been with me. You know, no matter what, I can't shake it off in the best possible way. Like, I feel like most of the, you know, interesting scripts that come to me are horror movies. And I think it's also because they're so universal, you know, and they can encompass so many different things in them. I always am drawn to them. And also, I guess, because I started my career doing horror, that's also, in a way, how a part of the industry views me, which I'm very grateful for. I mean, all of my first movies before Pan's Labyrinth were horror films, because they always needed a little girl, you know, in a scary movie, so that was me. But I love the genre, absolutely. I'm a big fan of it myself. I find that both horror and fantasy are some of the most rewarding and also fun genres to work in, because it gives you more creative liberties as opposed to other kinds of maybe more contemporary sort of roles. But yeah, I'm much like yourself. I can't help but to be a little bit biased about genre film and TV.
No, we appreciate that, because horror is universal in that way.
Yeah.
But you started as a fearless kid in this crazy world. I've been doing horror movies, and then through Pan's Labyrinth. What scares you?
Oof. Whoa. That's a deep question. Oh God, a lot of things. I mean, the loss of the people we love terrifies me every single day. I mean, there's a lot of things that the cruelty, sometimes the lack of empathy and humanity sometimes just really scares me, but it helps me to to know that there's also the complete opposite out there, and that is also, it's important to carry with one. There's a lot of hostility, but there's also a lot of love, and I think that's what really matters, and that's what should always win. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things scare me, but a lot of things move me forward and propel me forward too.
And to end, I wanted to put that if you put yourself as the fawn, perhaps, but in the film industry, and you met a young actor, either of the age you were then or even a bit older, but still early in her career, what would be the 3 tasks that that you would ask them to do to set them on their way?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is, if you're good at anything else in acting, if you have a different passion, if you're better at anything else, probably do that, to be honest. But if really acting is the thing that you want to do, the thing that you're best at, the thing that moves you, your passion, go all for it, but understand that it is definitely for the long haul. You got to do it for the right reasons. And you got to do it because you have love for it. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough journey. So that's one of them. Get prepared. Study. Go to acting school. Try to absorb as much as you can. Try to learn. Try to be on set a lot. Even if you're honestly not as an actor, even just as a shadow to someone, so that you can absorb and you can learn the behavior on set. That's always going to be very helpful. And then third, I think maybe work on yourself and your relationship, something other than acting that will also keep you fulfilled, because there's going to be a lot of downtime, there's going to be a lot of doubt, a lot of times in there where maybe you identify yourself as an actor so much that then you lose your identity as a person and you don't know who you are anymore. So make sure there's something else that you also love, and that there's other people that are there to support you in the process.
You have such an inspiring journey. Obviously, being part of this movie is massive, but the way you took on this acting challenge since your early age, all the way in, it's fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us.
Thank you, Alex. It's an honor.
I think a lot of young actors who are watching this are going to look at this and this perseverance, but level-headedness is something they're going to really relate to. So thank you so much, Ivana.
I appreciate it very much.
We are delighted. I'm probably going to watch it a 5th time.
Nice.
And meanwhile, I actually recommend for everybody to watch it at least 5 times, and celebrate this amazing movie, celebrate this amazing actor, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your time.
Cheers. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.